Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/411, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is a ride preview, a ride preview for the Oregon coast. And this one is called Mysterious Oregon Coast 2025. And why would it be mysterious? It is because I am riding with the one and only Mysterious James. We had so much fun the last time that we did this. We are doing it again. And we are doing it, well, when you are hearing this, it is long in the rearview mirror. I'm sitting here recording this, at least a solid month and a half ahead of its release date, just because I always like to do these recordings of these previews before the ride actually happens, for all of the reasons you might imagine, because it's good for you to get my intentions on what things are before the ride hits. Case in point, Lake Ontario, how that kind of changed quite remarkably, given all of the scenarios with the e-bike and all of that, and the ferry and all of those things. Well, here, the Mysterious Oregon Coast 2025 ride is no different. But it's different in the sense that I think that we are going to go back to a more traditional, probably, riding cadence. And of course, there's always room to change. When I've ridden with James in the past, he is a big fan of the Adventure Cycling Association's hard maps, paper maps. I don't know if they're still made of paper. They're plasticky. They're great. And he always updates them. And what's great about that is the hiker-biker situations are very well mapped out. Whereas I tend to rely on the book, Cycling the Pacific Coast, as I've talked about many times before, which tends to focus mostly on the state campsites, the incredibly excellent Oregon State hiker-biker campsites. James will know much more about private camps that have hiker-bikers as well, or hiker-biker rates, and we took advantage of that on the remix ride that we did last year. I am going to pitch on this, the preview episode, the kind of normal TikTok, because I think we did something different last year and we missed out on some like greatest hits. And I think I would like to hit some of those. So will we hit all of the places that I'm going to say? Hey, I'm not sure. I think we're going to end up playing this one more by ear than I'm used to doing, just because of the nature of things. The other thing that is up in the air is just there's a COVID going around, and I was exposed to it. I am testing negative, but you just never know. So that's the sort of specter that is overhanging all of this, that the odds of me catching COVID mid-ride are not zero. And I am not sure how that will go. I think that so long as I'm physically capable of riding, having COVID while doing an outdoor camping kind of situation, I'm not going to be risking exposing anybody outside. From what we know now about COVID, it's really hard to transmit outside. I'm going to be bringing masks with me, extra masks, the good ones, not the KN95. I'm going full N95, the good ones, just in case, because I don't like to expose people to my stuff, because I got exposed to it and I don't like that hanging over my head. So I would like to not, since I have a choice, do that to other people. So we'll see what ends up happening with all of that. You're going to learn more about that next week, probably, or the week after, or however long it would take in terms of this incubation. But I'm going to be bringing tests with me as well. Going to be a responsible human being throughout all of this on that topic. I probably won't bring it up again unless it comes up, and we'll just see how it goes for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the ride itself. It is going to be an extra fun one, and it is going to be the entire state of Oregon this time. No, I will not be starting from my usual spot in Tillamook, Oregon. I am actually going to be going to Astoria, Oregon, right on the Columbia River there. So we are starting at mile marker 0 or 360, depending on which way you measure it. And I'll be going all the way down and crossing the border into California. More on that in a moment here. The way that I'm effectuating this is a little bit different than normal. And part of that is just to get it so James and I can start in the same place. There were all sorts of different plans that were going on before with James. He was thinking about starting up in Seattle or perhaps even Victoria or Vancouver. And then when everything all settled down, he had some bike issues. TBD on that, by the way, because as of this here recording, it is unclear whether he is going to be riding his own bike that is in for repair or whether he's going to be borrowing a bike from a friend in Oregon or not. You'll know when I do, basically. That's a piece to all of the craziness on that. We are going to meet at the Portland International Airport PDX, where I will be flying in with my bike and my gear. More on the bike and gear in a moment. And I have a one-way car rental where I will be schlepping both of our bikes. Fingers crossed. Hopefully we can fit them all in. I'm sure we can make it work. And we'll be staying at a hotel about midway to the Oregon coast. Why are we doing that? Because it's going to be on the 4th of July. And it turns out it's really hard to get a hotel or any kind of roofed lodging or any kind of campsite late at night on 4th of July. So it turns out we won't be doing that whole way. So that's the reason for the one-way car rental. We'll be returning that in Astoria, Oregon on the morning of the 5th. And then we'll be getting wheels down from there. So yeah, we're doing the whole coast. James is going to continue on to his home in the Bay Area. I will be finishing off substantially earlier than that because I have 10 days of cycling. Or I have 10 days between when I land and when I take off. And the reason for that is just life, right? Just to have X amount of time that I can do. And this is the time that I've got. So that ends up being really good. Actually, that ends up being luxurious, maybe. And the reason is that if you're starting off your first day in Astoria, Oregon, and you're riding in the 50 to 60-ish miles a day, that gives me a buffer day, or gives us a buffer day. And we've decided that we're not going to choose it at the outset where to spend that buffer day, but we have a buffer day. And that could be something as simple as, hey, let's take a 0 day, or some of the more robust riding days, and I'll identify one of them in a little bit here, we could conceivably split them up if there is a camping opportunity or any kind of a lodging opportunity in between the typical 1 day worth of riding. So that would maybe take something that's a really hard 60 miles and instead you do it in a more casual 30 and 30 over 2 days. We're just going to play a lot of that by ear and do this as a way of enjoyment. Neither of us have really been riding Oregon coast style riding. In fact, James has mentioned, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, he has not been on a bike in quite a long time. And for me, I thought that my Lake Ontario trip would be a great shakedown to get me more into bike leg shape. But obviously that didn't happen the way that we kind of wanted it to. And so while I have been cycling through the spring, really going back to the winter and spring, it's been really limited. It has not been good full-throated 30, 40, 50 mile days. A few of them, of course, in Florida, really none to speak of on the Lake Ontario trip. So this is the first big trip of the year for me and for James as well. So we're just going to take it easy and not have any kind of like really crazy non-realistic goals for our ride here. As I mentioned, I'm going to approach this as doing the greatest hits, the usual route, the one that comes from the book with our modifications. I'd like to call this the Tim and James modifications because there is at least one, and we may do a second one that is starting to come about. But we'll be starting off at Nehalem State Park, Nehalem Bay State Park, I believe, on the first day. Not a terribly long ride, but it just literally recently reopened. They've done a substantial amount of work based on a park bond. And so the opportunity that this could be a brand new version of the hiker bikers, like the one that we saw at Devil's Lake last year and that we've seen in a few other places, Harris Beach, and I believe also Honeyman, which we were at last year because of my bonking situation last year. Those are really nice. So I'm actually really hoping that Nehalem Bay State Park has the new ones. But regardless, I haven't stayed there in years and years. years. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it again. It's a great beachy one, which is just fantastic. We love the beachy ones. But yeah, Nehalem State Park. The next night is a bit of an open question. We could stop at Cape Lookout, but I think that in terms of maybe making a call to maybe bike a little bit more, it would be a shorter day to end up at Cape Lookout. But if we did it as a kind of normal 55 mile day and kept going to Pacific City and stayed at the Webb Campground, County Campground, the one that I've sworn off a little bit after the bad experience last time where they put me at an alternate one with no water or anything like that, it does look like they've got spots available. That would actually make it so that the next day would be a little bit more spaced out, because we like to go to not Beverly Beach State Park, which is in the book, but to South Beach State Park, because then you've got the opportunity to go to Brewers on the Bay in Newport, which we really, so that's a likelihood. And then the TikTok kind of goes to Honeyman, which we were at last year, and it's got the new to us at least hiker biker site where you don't have to push your bike up a hill anymore, which was great. And it was a really nice setup. Then open question, are we going to go to Sunset Bay? My least favorite of all of the ones from the book. Do we get a hotel night? Do we go to that county-based one? I think it was a county one that we went to last year. Open question. We'll have to see how that goes. Then Humbug Mountain, which is a really fun one that's later on down. And then we have a really up and down. It's a 60-mile day, but it's a hard 60 to Harris Beach. Then eventually I need to, that's in Brookings, by the way, very close to the state border. Then it's a fairly short ride and a fairly flat ride to Crescent City, where I will end up going to the airport and renting a car, again, a one-way car rental that'll get me to Medford. I do an overnight at a hotel there, and then I have a 5:15 a.m. flight out of Medford that will eventually get me home. So that is an incredibly early morning the next morning. But as I mentioned, there's a buffer day in there. And so there's a few opportunities to take a zero. Do we want to spend some time in Newport? Do we want to spend some time perhaps earlier on? Maybe we do want to spend a night at Cape Lookout and then maybe only go to Pacific City the next day, which would be an incredibly short day. But if we really wanted to do some beachy stuff or to hang out there, that certainly would be a possibility. The one that I'm eyeing, though, but I'm not sure what the opportunities are there for us, is to split up the day between Humbug Mountain and Harris Beach. Like I said, that's a tough day. It's a lot of up and down, and it's just a lot going on with that particular day. So that might be an opportunity to split that up into 2 30-mile chunks and figure out if there's any camping or lodging opportunities in the Gold Beach area, which is a town I've always wanted to spend some time in and never have the opportunity. So that's always a possibility there. So no plans for any fast forwards or anything like that unless they become necessary. You just never know what can be going on. So that's the rough itinerary. Let me talk a little bit about the gear. I will be flying the Safari, the acoustic bike. The e-bike is not an option, and many of you know this because there's no ability to transport batteries of the size that I've got on an airplane. They're just flat out prohibited. So it's one of the challenges with e-bikes. We talked about it with staging. So even if I wanted to, it's not going to be an option. But a little bit of preview. A preview, perhaps. The e-bike will be going to the West Coast this year. Huh. How is that going to happen? You're just going to have to wait to find out, because that might be an episode later on in the fall after we get done with this one. So you're going to have to be patient. But that's a little bit of a tease for you. So we'll have the old school Safari, the one that has served me well for all these years. It has just been into the shop. I thought that there was a problem with it, and there was. It was a bent derailleur hanger. And I thought that the shop that had originally done the work on it had just done a bad job on it. I took it back to my tried and true shop in DC, and dude took one look at it and said, yeah, derailleur hanger. You don't have to leave it here. Give me 20 minutes. And then it's great now. So when did that happen? Most likely on the flight back from Oregon last year, I think. And so what I'm going to do when I pack this bike up in the bag for flying is I'm going to take extra special care to make sure that the derailleur is as protected as possible so we don't get into that bent derailleur situation. If I find in the future that my bike is shifting poorly like it had been, I think that's something that I need to think about immediately from the jump. Is there a bent derailleur? And it's something that if you bring it in, you may be able to eyeball it and do it your own out in the field. There's special tools for that. that bike shops have that you would never carry with you because they're these long metal things that kind of show where it is relative to the tire, or excuse me, to the wheel. And it's actually interesting to watch the process happen, but it bends it precisely back to where it's supposed to be. And then it's easy to just re-index things from there. And it was fascinating to watch. I'm glad that it was a simple fix because I thought it was going to be a more expensive fix. But in any event, that's going to be the bike that's going to be coming. Gear, I'm going to be packing in a little bit here, frankly, because I'm here at the cabin and I'll be flying out of DC. The gear setup is going to be 2 panniers. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to not put the front rack on. You may recall, I think it was last year's ride, I had put a new front rack on, and the new front rack is too wide for flying in the bag. And rather than assembling and reassembling it, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strap the sleep kit bag that I have to my front handlebars and just go with that as my option. Then we'll go with 2 panniers on the back, and I may consider a rack bag as well, just to have a little bit more capacity, but I'm really going to try to not have a ton of stuff. What I find when I do the dry bag situation, I tend to find that it's hard for me to put groceries into my panniers. And so I think what I'm going to do is just bring an extra dry bag that's easy to throw on the rear rack between the 2 panniers, and just so that I've got some more capacity for situations like that. I'm going to resist the urge to bring too much stuff. Why is that? Because on the Oregon coast, especially with the weather that we're going to be getting, it's really unlikely that I'm going to need a bunch of clothes. I'll bring a lot of underwear with me. I'll bring a bunch of pairs of socks. Those are the things that are the most consumable. But I'm really going to try to basically be realistic because I tend to wear 1 pair of pants, often for the entire ride. I rarely wear shorts in the summer on the Oregon coast. I tend to like to be covered up. I bought 2 of those. Really, they're newish to me, but I know they've been around for a while, especially for you hikers. Those sun hoodies, long sleeve, very loose. I've got 2 of those. I think I'm going to wear those for the ride or something underneath it. If it's a little cooler, I'll wear a long sleeve merino wool layer, but I think that's really unlikely that it's going to be that cool because you all know I run hot. So it'll probably be a tee of some type. And again, I just got to figure that all out. Honestly, I'm probably going to be rotating between those 2 overlayers and maybe wearing 1 or a couple of different t-shirts, and then I'll rinse them and I'll let them dry. It takes forever to dry things on the Oregon coast, but going to do the best I can. And then, of course, I'll have sleep clothes and then a civilian clothes situation. So probably a merino base layer will be the civilian clothing, a second pair of pants that I'll either rotate in for riding or use it exclusively for civilian riding. And of course, there's always the opportunity to do laundry in any of the given towns, any place along the way. We'll just see how that all goes. So riding really light. I may or may not bring a stove. I think James is bringing one. And the good thing with that is that he's going to be driving up, so he doesn't have to worry about the fuel container situation. So I may just be like, hey, James, can I have some hot water? So that way I'm also a little bit lighter when things are all said and done. Going to bring the same tent that I always bring. Going to bring one of my down bags. I've got 2 of basically the same down bag. Don't think I'll bring a liner. It looks like the lows are going to be in the mid 50s and they're just fantastic for weather in that range. I'll bring a hat. I'll bring hats and the usual. I don't think I'll bring cold gloves or anything like that, but I'll bring a cold weather hat and a baseball style hat. That's what I usually do. Bicycling gloves, the usuals. I'll bring the water cube so that I can stay really hydrated as I go along. I think I found that to be really good where I tend to enjoy just 1 particular water bottle, and I'll just refill that from the water cube, and that'll probably live on the rear rack. And I'm not going to carry too much water. It's going to be cool enough that my water consumption needs aren't going to be super high. But I do want to make sure that I spend time really hydrating. Oh, I should mention, speaking of hydration, a listener, and again, forgive me, I just realized this, so I did not go back to look to give you proper credit. But I was talking about on the Florida ride, my struggles with hydration and those sports drinks and how they don't agree with me. And a listener wrote in and then suggested basically salt tablets, but they make them flavored. And I found a good set of them. And it actually even has a little bit of caffeine in them. And so I'm going to try those out on this trip so that I'm drinking just plain water, but I will occasionally, as needed, take one or two of these tablets. And they're chewables and they taste like citrusy orange stuff, but they've got saltiness to them as well because they do contain quite a few electrolytes. So I think I'm going to try that on for size. And then I'm not worrying about diluting the sports drinks and all the other kind of stuff. More things just to experiment with, to avoid the cramping. I usually don't have cramping issues on the Oregon coast because I'm not sweating as much. I tend to hydrate just fine. It's cooler. It's not as bad on my body, but again, this being the first big ride of the year for me where I know I'm going to be doing these miles, I think that it's probably smart to pay attention to all of that. I'm also going to be bringing some of those stroop waffles as some of my snacks, at least to begin with. There's plenty of opportunities to buy snacks on the coast as you go along. Astoria alone will probably be a good spot. I think we're going to be going through a whole bunch of places on the first day, even where we can load up. We've got Tillamook, we've got Newport. There's just a lot of opportunities. We end up going to a lot of Safeways and Rays on our way. James and I are of the same mind when it comes to utilizing grocery stores as our place to load up. It's a good economical way to do it, but that won't stop us from eating out either because that's just how we do. So weather, I think weather is going to be glorious. Why don't I just pull it up here in real time? Wow. And I've only got Astoria and Portland. Portland's not going to be a very good example here, but as I am looking at things here, starting on the day of arrival, the high is 62, the low is 53. The first day of riding and subsequent days in Astoria, it's all really similar. There's not a drop of rain in there. There's a lot of clouds, but the highest high is 70 degrees on a day that's sunny. The lows are, again, in the mid-50s, highs more usually in the mid-60s. So it looks like a classic summer on the Oregon coast. Dry, prevailing winds will be tailwinds, unless there is any kind of a storm where things will sometimes cycle in the opposite direction. That's unusual. So it looks like we got the perfect weather for a ride. It's a ride James and I really like. We repeat it a lot because it is literally that good. One other thing that I wanted to share before we kind of wrap up the preview episode here, and that is the nature of cycling, road cycling, classic bike touring. I don't know if any of you are members of Adventure Cycling Association. James is, and he shared an email with me that they wrote. And I think that we're starting to get some confirmation of things that we have seen, and maybe you have seen too. In past rides that we've done, we're just like, where are all the cyclists? Where is everybody? We encountered more hikers in the biker campsites than cyclists the whole way down last year. And frankly, I don't see any reason to think that it won't be any different this year. The reason why I bring up the ACA thing is they've been finding that their numbers are going down. They're actually selling their building and their location in Missoula, Montana. Now, it's probably not going to happen until after the summer. So if you have plans to go visit the ACA headquarters, get your free ice cream. It's there. They said that it's going to be there through the summer, but they're going to go all remote. And I think it's just talking about the realities of what's happening in classic bicycle touring. Now, I've talked about bike adventures for the better part of the last year or maybe even two. You'll have to remind me. I've gone a little bit out of just the pavement riding, even though I do a lot of it. But ACA has been classic bike touring since 1976. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have kind of trail riding involved as well. They've tried to move away from that, but their core thing are bike routes on asphalt. And that has been diminishing, they say. And so maybe that makes some sense. What are we seeing? It's a demographic thing. I am not a part of the demographic that started all of this. That's you boomers out there. Boomers were the ones that were in probably their 20s and 30s in the mid-1970s. When the bike centennial hit in the States. And of course, if you're in Europe and you're elsewhere in the world, you had your own movements. But here in the States, that's where it really took off. And that was the beginning of the Adventure Cycling Association. Of course, they've been at it for 40 plus years since then. But those folks are starting to age out. They're starting to not cycle anymore. Many, sadly, are passing away. And of course, that's just the natural run of things. My generation, Gen X kids, I don't think that we did it nearly as much as the folks who were boomers. And to the extent that we did, we are maybe starting to age out or diversify or whatever. But I think also if you're a younger listener, you may be doing things that are more off the beaten path kind of stuff. You're not riding on Highway 101. You're riding on trails. You're doing backcountry stuff. You're doing bike packing. And that is what the trend lines seem to be. And I think that this ride is going to be maybe another bit of a data point. We're riding right after the 4th of July. We're going to be riding during 4th of July weekend on the Oregon coast, one of the more popular bike touring routes in the entire country. It'll be really interesting. If there aren't a lot of people utilizing those hiker-biker campgrounds, particularly cyclists, there might be a lot of hikers. If that's 2 years in a row during a real prime time to be out there, boy, you really have to start to wonder, okay, hey, what's happening here? And what's happening here is complex. I talked about people aging out. I talked about the prospects of people cycling in different ways. I'll be honest, many of you who listen will contact me and talk about how you're just not comfortable riding on roads. Hey, man, I get that. Every time I hear about somebody who is hit, and then sometimes drivers who intentionally hit cyclists, that's the kind of stuff that makes me rethink how comfortable I feel on these roads. So I think that a lot of stuff is starting to change out there in terms of where priorities are and where people are seeking their adventure by bike. Equipment's getting better. The routes in the backcountry are getting better and better. I think that there's some complexity here, but we're keeping our eyes open as to how many cyclists we see on this prime time weekend change that will be out there and whether or not we see a difference in the numbers compared to last year. It'll be interesting to see. So anyways, that is the ride. That is the adventure. Looking really forward to this. I think it's going to be a fun bunch of episodes for you to listen to. It's not just going to be me talking. It's going to be me in conversation with James and us talking about our adventures through the day and our challenges and our successes and things along those lines. I don't know about you, but I find these episodes more fun for me to listen to. So I think that you as well. So I'm glad that we're able to revisit it with James again. All right. So that is it for this particular episode. Starting next week, it will be the mysterious Oregon coast 2025. Looking forward to sharing it with you. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.